matter of the people of the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson, case number BA096.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your
Boom. We are
country.
recording Taylor on an uncharacteristic Monday day. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
There's a lot going on right now. And if I stop and contemplate all the different things that are going on that need to be juggled, I will drop the plates that are spinning. So
Ooh.
I'm just going to keep barreling forward.
All right. Well, then let's just do this. Let's just focus on this.
Let's just barrel forward. Do you want to intro us?
Yes. Hello, everybody. Welcome. We are doomed to fail with the podcast that brings you history's most notorious disasters and epic failures. I am Taylor, joined by Farz, as
I
always.
am Farz, and I had my intro reading privileges revoked by Taylor. That's why we're hearing Taylor now.
You did. It was, you got voted off by me and my husband.
That's
I don't know why he gets a vote, but he
that's
had
kind
a
of
vote.
biased. I mean,
It was mostly him, but he was like,
it's fair. It's fair. He knows this stuff better than I do.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll go ahead and dive right in. So I kind of teed this up on the last episode of how I was bouncing between two topics, and I got all of one outline done, partially another outline done, when that I think was probably going to end up being a better topic. And the reason mostly was because as I got to the end of the first outline, I was like, there's literally no Doom to Fail story here.
There
And
isn't
then
always. I think that's not okay, but keep going.
and I was like, we have to hold true to our stated mission, which we've always held true to,
Do we? Okay.
which we never have. So you know what? I'm actually just gonna go with the outline I finished. And yeah, save the other one for next week or some other time. So, anyways, we'll go ahead and dive in. And you were actually partially the inspiration for this in a really weird roundabout way, because when you did that Poggio Broccolini guy,
Mm-hmm.
and you start talking about the popes and ancient, Catholic stuff, it got me like all riled up, because that kind of stuff is really, really interesting to me, mostly because it's so terrifying. It's so sinister and like scary, but also kind of like sexy. Like it's weird. It's like a little bit of all of them. And I was thinking, like, there's so many massive cultural touch points that are rooted in Catholicism that are just like super fun. Well, okay, sorry, not fun. There's like big touch points. Let's put it that way. So, for example,
silently laughing.
well, I forgot that I wrote down the whole sexual abuse scandal thing here.
Yeah, that's not fun.
So big cultural touch points. You have the papacy. You have sexual abuse scandals. You have all these amazing horror movies like The Exorcist. It's all based. You have the concept of exorcism. It's so fun. It's so cool, and
It is fun.
yeah. And there was one cultural figure within the Catholic Church that was like super famous, and I was thinking to myself that they kind of faded into obscurity, and we don't really talk about this person anymore. And especially given the fact that they're pretty outdated within the framework of today's society. Can you guess what I'm talking about?
No. Isn't Mother Teresa?
Yes.
She's the worst. That's my stance as we start.
I don't know if I can say she's the worst. She's definitely complicated.
Okay. I mean, she didn't help people, so that's
we're gonna get into that.
One check.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Cool.
That's literally what we're gonna get into is the history of Mother Teresa and like what we think of her in retrospect versus what we experienced when we were kids. I mean, when I was a kid, like Mother Teresa was the end all be all. Like she was kind of like this like multicultural international kind of like deity type figure. She was here in the US speaking to presidents, she was speaking to dictators in other countries, like she was doing all kinds of stuff, and she was kind of all over the map. But like I said, she has a very, very complicated history, as is her charity. So we're gonna get into it. First things first, to completely understand her life, there's about 200 books that are written about her. And honestly, if you really want to understand it, you have to understand every nuanced detail about the Catholic Church, the papacy, the ascension of cardinals, the ascension of saints, beatification, canonization, leadership over time, the Vatican Church, the state of global politics, and the economy between the 1960s and 1990s. It is actually probably impossible to fully understand every element of her life. because just the Catholic Church part is hard enough, I think. But what I was getting at was that I'm gonna go into her backstory and just kind of like list off a bunch of stuff because and you just kind of have to accept it for what it is. Because if I try to legitimately explain every detail of her life, it would be like a 15-hour lesson on the history of the church. So we're gonna bypass that.
Okay.
And really, what I'm trying to get to is the salacious part of what we think about her now, not like here's when she was born. Here's like cool, all that stuff, whatever. It's fine. But like that's not fun. We're gonna get into the fun stuff. So I'm gonna TLDR her life pretty dramatically here. Okay.
Okay.
So she was born on August 26th, which is actually one day away from my birthday. I'm August 27th. So I'm
Oh,
kind of also a saint. She was born on August 26th, 1910, in the current day country of Macedonia, which was back then the Ottoman Empire. Her birth name was Agnès Gonja Boyagio. So, I did not practice. I did not practice saying that
that was
one time.
perfect.
Juan's gonna hear this and be like, see, this is what I'm talking about. So she ethnically was of Albanian and Indian descent,
Mhm.
and she was obviously born into, no shocker, a Catholic family, but her family actually wasn't particularly involved in any religious work or like push her in the decision to join the church, but she kind of did that on her own volition. And at 18 years old, she left home to join a thing called the Sisters of Loreto in Ireland. And a year later, she was sent to India where she would teach at a convent. And that's kind of like where the myth of her kind of begins. So
Mhm.
after about 20 years of teaching here, she basically took note of the extreme poverty of the surrounding areas of Calcutta. And at this time, so 20 years into this, yeah, so she would have, it would have been like the 1940s, 1950s or so. This was like a really bad time in India's history. So for context, what was going on at this time was Mahatma Gandhi was leading a mass revolt against British rule
Mhm.
over India. A famine had struck India, killing around 3 million people who had starved to death. You had the start of the formation of Pakistan, which was only done because Hindus and Muslims were killing each other in India, and so like there was a lot of upheaval going on, which also begs the point of stop going into countries and colonizing them. Like, let them do their own thing, and this wouldn't be an
Yes.
issue.
Oh, yes.
So,
You
and
should
then
write Britain a letter and
uh,
just tell them,
no, no,
if you're thinking about it, don't do it anymore.
we're gonna do something even more powerful. We're gonna do an episode on Britain. That'll teach them. All
That'll
20 of
teach
you
them.
who are gonna hear this.
Mm-hmm.
So, in 1950, she ends up leaving that convent and founding the Missionaries of the Charity. Sorry, it's called Missionaries of Charity. That's what it was called. And this is like, again, this is like a whole process. Like, this wasn't just like I'm just gonna leave being a nun at a convent and go do my. No, she had to like write to the Pope. She had to go to the cardinal there, have the cardinal write to the Pope, get all kinds of approvals and all this shit for her to be like allowed to do this. It's like overly complicated. Yeah, Taylor's tr- kind of rolling her eyes, which I sense.
I literally can feel my blood boiling because I think the Catholic Church is such a piece of shit. But you can continue.
But it's so fun. How can you hate something so fun?
It causes so much damage.
So the
I mean,
fun
like
part you're just
if
gonna bypass.
I mean, I'm like the fun part I like to learn about, but I'm not. But I think it's a net negative for the world. And it's just so weird that these grown-ups are pretending to talk to God because I know you're not really talking to God because God isn't real. So
They
like,
have
grow
such
up.
cool garbs though. If you could
Oh, that's
dress
so
like the
weird.
Pope.
No, it's just like everything else is just like a power play, and they just want to hurt people, and they're bad people.
So we're gonna get into Taylor. You're going to be able to go off on a 30-minute tirade in about 10 minutes from now
Okay,
because we're
I can
getting
feel
into
my blood
into
boiling.
the thick
Keep
of it.
going. Yeah.
So the point of this charity was to provide services to the most destitute people in Calcutta. These are like the untouchables, right? Like these are the people that like nobody would deal with. They wouldn't go into hospitals, none of that stuff. So
Hmm.
she basically established a home for these people to get services, food, shelter, all that kind of stuff. It was essentially just a place for people to die with dignity, is how she would refer to it. So yeah, like I said, these people were untouchables, and so she was basically the only game in town offering this. She would expand the kind of support her missionary would offer and the locations in which they would operate. So as of today, they have the following: they have 180 homes for the dying, destitute, mentally challenged adults, and people with AIDS. There's 61 children homes. There's 27 facilities for lepers, which I didn't even know there was that many lepers to like fill 27 facilities full of them.
Just as a PSA to you, is that armadillos carry leprosy, and I know they're in Austin, so don't touch them.
You know what? I'm glad you told me that because I was gonna start licking armadillos and now I won't. So
Yeah,
thank you.
you're
So there's 5 homes for women with AIDS, and then they also run a ton of schools and food shelters and stuff like that. Basically, that's the gist of it. And they're international. They're all across the board. Um, just
Who
to,
pays for that?
we're going to get to that because
All
that
right.
is a big, big thing here, Taylor.
Okay, good.
That is that is
I'm on the
that
right.
is when your tirade can start.
Great.
Once I get to that.
Okay, go.
So, as part of the myth building of Mother Teresa, again, she was meeting with the people all around the world. She was just like, I don't know how to describe her. Like, it was, she wasn't like a school administrator. She was like she's like Matthew Perry in the Lincoln commercials. But not Matthew Perry, Matthew McConaughey. She's like Matthew McConaughey in the Lincoln commercials. Like, she is the voice of, in this case, the destitute, but the way that he is the voice of Lincoln.
Okay.
Lincoln, the car company.
No, I know what you're talking about, but like those commercials are so weird. But I get it. I kind of get it.
Spokesperson. She's a
Okay.
spokesperson. That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Some one thing that she did that I thought was actually pretty cool. So as we're about to go into again, literally like in the next like week or two, Israel and Lebanon were shelling each other in the 1980s,
Mhm.
and there was apparently like the front line of this war was in Beirut, and apparently there was like a children's hospital in the middle, and there was like 37 kids trapped in this children's hospital with both sides shooting past them. And so Mother Teresa ended up actually brokering a peace treaty or like an armistice between the two sides for long enough for her team to go in and like bring these kids out. It's like there's some stuff that she's done that it's
Sure.
like, okay, that's kind of cool. So, oh yeah, and then she died on September 5th, 1997. Anyways, moving on. So let's get to the good stuff. Okay. So, several things off the top. And we're going to start with like a really fun old timey backstory of the Catholic Church. So, there was a guy named Ignatius of Loyola. He was a Spanish priest from the 1500s. And when he was 18 years old, he took up arms for a Duke of Spanish royalty in the Battle of Papaloma. So, and this is the part that blows me away. This is history is so incredibly fascinating. So, this battle took place in 1521 when French troops attacked Spanish troops to reclaim a part of France/Spain called Navarrese. As of today, this part is still split 50-50 between them. Isn't that incredible? It's been
Incredible.
like nearly 600 years. They still are like contesting this one region. It's like a tiny little municipality. Like it's a nothing. Like it doesn't matter
Yeah.
strategically.
Yeah.
Anyways, back to Ignatius. So during this battle, which Spain would lose, a cannonball fired by France shattered his leg, which left him in perpetual pain. And it was through this pain that he says he found Christ in his religious calling in life, is how that kind of started. So this kind of kicked off the long tradition history of the Catholic Church and the theory that pain brings you closer to God. It's known as redemptive suffering, and it's meant to like
Oh.
redeem you from your sins and therefore bring you closer to Christ. Also, how cool is that? Redemptive suffering? That just sounds metal.
No, how fucking convenient it is. You don't have to help anyone.
God, you are so negative. You're right. You're right. But
Right? Like these like old women sometimes come to our house like once a year and like read us from the Bible, and I was like, okay. And then like I just don't want to be mean to them because they have good intentions. But one of them was like, do the whole like blessed are the suffering, blah 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 blah, and like that keeps you helpless.
yeah, that's exactly why I brought that up.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Okay.
So I mean, literally the next part, words in the outline read that can be a problematic perspective when you run a house for those dying or who are extremely unwell. So I'm gonna name off some people here who had like firsthand experience of what was going on within this facility for the destitute and dying. So Robin Fox, this guy was an academic and anthropologist who wrote on his experience visiting the house of dying in the Lancet in 1994. He wrote the following, and I'm gonna have to parse this out a little bit because he's using some weird old timey English that I don't totally he's American. I don't know why he talks like this, but I'll get into it. So he wrote, this is a quote: "On a short visit, I could not judge the power of their spiritual approach, but I was disturbed to learn that the formulary includes no strong analgesics." Do you know what that means?
No, I don't even know what words you just said.
So, okay, put it in plain English. What he was saying. So, a formulary is a list of drugs.
Hmm.
Analgesics are pain medications. So,
Oh,
what
I
he was
see.
saying is, I can't say whether their spiritual approach is working or not. I was shocked to see that they literally had on the prescription list of medications no pain medicine for these people who are suffering in abject pain.
Exactly.
The second part of his quote is along with the neglect of diagnosis, the lack of good analgesia marks Mother Teresa's approach as clearly separate from the hospice movement. I know which I prefer.
So she's putting you in a hospice and hurting you and being like, this is because God loves you.
Exactly.
Will say fuck that again
Well,
because
we're not even at the part where I was gonna say you could go on a tirade. We're not even
okay,
there yet.
I was so mad.
This is a tirade appetizer.
Okay,
Okay.
I'm gonna stand up and move my body a little bit so I don't have a heart
Another
attack.
journalist, Mary Loudon, witnessed nuns reusing needles and basically just washing them under cold water to sterilize them.
Cool. That's not even
Um,
the right temperature of water.
exactly. And basically, it was a foregone conclusion, or it should be understood by now that basically they had no facilities here at this place. Like there was nothing actually. There's no. It wasn't like a hospital you were going into. Like there's basically a cot and you just die there basically.
Hmm.
Um, Almost worse than that, due to what it implies, was that the sisters who worked here were secretly baptizing the dying. So I referenced it as kind of like a soul snatching facility, like a
I think
place to collect souls.
Mormons were baptizing dead people. You baptize your ancestors.
Yeah, didn't they do? They did Anne Frank.
Ugh, Jesus fucking Christ, you guys. Like,
So So on the one hand, you have people suffering from intense pain who are denied pain relief, which is in line with a long-held Christian belief, and one that Mother Teresa held herself, which was suffering in people as a means of reaching God. And then on the other hand, you have the added bonus of when they die, they will have been secretly baptized against their knowledge when they were Hindus or Muslims to go to heaven.
it's like when people tell you that like a bird pooping on you is good luck. It isn't. They just want you to feel better.
Yeah, yeah, totally,
It's the same
totally.
thing. It's just like you're suffering because you can get closer to God. Like you don't have to suffer. God's not real. It's so stupid.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So it goes without saying that the conditions obviously were very sparse and very rudimentary, which would lead you to believe that there was no resources available to these people, and that's why it was so sparse and rudimentary.
Gonna ask that.
That would be
Probably not
inaccurate.
true.
So,
Right.
knowing the exact finances of an India-based and globally operating religious charity is like nearly impossible. Like it's
Sure.
just too far reaching and too vast and too secretive to actually be fully exposed. A person named Sushan Shields worked for Mother Teresa for about 10 years. And she wrote a manuscript that, while it actually went unpublished, parts of it were excerpted a bit. And she's the one who exposed the secret baptisms I just referenced. And she also wrote this piece, which is quoted as our bank account was already the size of a great fortune and increased with every postal delivery. Around $50 million had collected in one checking account in the Bronx. About seven
Like,
years. Go ahead. Sorry.
no, I don't want to say like if you're religious, that's fine, obviously. Whatever. But just don't hurt people. Why would you hurt people? What is the
Because
point of that?
because so actually I'm gonna go into that piece too. I actually have a section where I literally just want to talk about that one piece.
Okay, 'cause I don't understand. Like, does she has like a scorecard for God that she thinks she's building up?
Yes.
What is it? Is that it? Okay, we'll talk about it later. I'll let you
Yes.
get to it.
Actually. So 7 years ago, there's an Italian investigative journalist. His name's so fun. Gianluigi Nuzzi.
Great.
Poggio broccolini, paprikizza.
Ta-da.
Um,
Perfect.
he published a book entitled Original Sin, and in it, he reports that Mother Teresa had so much money at the Vatican Bank that if she were to withdraw it, she would put the bank in default.
Oh my God. And okay, you're gonna tell me who's giving her the money, right? It's just like poor people donating.
Well, so for one thing, real quick on that, for context, in 2022, the bank held the total asset of about $3 billion. How much would you have to have on account to withdraw it and put that bank in it would have had to be in
Right.
the hundreds of millions of dollars. Like it had to be
Right.
so much freaking money. And that was only one. The other biggest fundraising facility she had was the one that's in the Bronx. And that one's the one where, I mean, 20 years ago, the lady said that there was $50 million just sitting in the bank account, or 30 years ago, there was just money sitting in the bank account.
Oh my
Um,
God.
in terms of where she gets the money, everywhere, literally everywhere. Everybody who's famous, everybody who's rich, everybody who's whatever, who basically the way it was framed in one article I read was that in the 1980s and 90s, Mother Teresa made it so that rich people didn't have to feel like they had to do things for the poor because she was doing it for them. So they would just give
Right.
her money and she'll just handle it. She loves the
Hmm.
poor, let her deal with it. That was
Hmm.
basically the takeaway from that. Um it also goes without saying that she was very anti-abortion and contraception.
Hmm.
She said at a national prayer breakfast in DC in 1994 that, quote, in destroying the power of giving life through contraception, a husband or wife is doing something to self. This turns the attention to self and so destroys the gift of love in him or her. In loving, the husband and wife must turn the attention to each other as happens in natural family planning and not to self as happens in contraception. So she's not. Well, this is the part that follows. She also goes, once the living love is destroyed by contraception, abortion follows very easily. So what she's saying is contraception is like this slippery slope that led to abortion. And we all agree we don't like abortion. We should also ban contraception.
That's not true. And also AIDS. We can talk about that.
So yeah, so she actually did do. She had a lot of homes that were dedicated to AIDS, which is also part of the reason why nobody cared about. Like
But
again,
like, you know how you could also help people not do that is with contraception.
right, yeah,
Yeah.
I get your point. I thought you were doing a Reagan bit because
No.
also that was
I
also
mean, I don't know if
part
the
of
Reagans do anything, but yeah.
that was also part of why nobody was paying that much attention to AIDS at the time was because she had all these homes, like she had homes dedicated for people with AIDS, and it was just like
Hmm.
how nobody wanted to help the poor people, nobody wanted to help people with AIDS, so they're like, whatever,
Right.
Mother Teresa will take care of it.
Yeah.
Um, she also equated abortion to being the greatest destroyer of peace today.
So stupid. It makes no sense.
So here's the thing. Here's where I like was like really thinking about my own perspective on this thing. And I was like, okay, pretend like you're assume your perspective on this is wrong. And maybe being alive in abject poverty and complete abandonment is better than never having been born. I don't know. My personal assessment of that is I'd rather just not be born.
Yeah, and you would never know because you wouldn't be born.
You would never know because you'd never be born.
It's not like there's like baby souls waiting. I mean, maybe they think that that is a thing, but like that's true. So I don't
Yeah, I mean, people,
know.
listeners, if you would rather be born than not, just write to us and let us know.
I mean, if you can choose to be where you're born, if there's like a line, and you can be like, it'd be great if I was richer than I am right now.
Yeah, you just like roll the dice, and it's like, hey, this time if you're born to Bill Gates. Like, cool, I'm gonna take it.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. Perfect. Yeah.
Um, so there's also been criticism in how her and her charity have portrayed India and specifically Calcutta, but that
Hmm.
like mostly what I see of that is coming from like Indian scholars who are saying it's not as bad as it was. But I looked up pictures of India and Calcutta during this time. It looks pretty bad, and not only that, but I was thinking about like, dude, I wouldn't want to visit New York City in the
No, I know.
1970s, 80s. Like,
Totally.
what must Calcutta been like back then?
I know. I
So
was watching a new Transformers movie and they're on the subway in the 90s and it's just like covered in graffiti. You're like, I don't want to
yeah,
visit
like it's not a dig at India, but it's like the whole world was kind of a shithole back then.
either. Hmm.
So, um, of the criticisms that were leveled against her, Christopher Hitchens, do you know what this is?
Wait, I think you froze. I heard
Oh,
so.
I was talking about Christopher Hitchens.
Who is that?
Okay, so he died a long time ago, but he was one of these like British intellectuals who wrote a lot on. He was a very countercultural intellectual. I'm trying to think like who
Hmm.
he's like. He's like Ben Shapiro, but less annoying and like nerdy. You know,
Okay.
like it's one of those guys. He just talks a lot about things and has a lot of opinions. So
Hmm.
he had my favorite assessment and probably the most fair assessment I read out of anybody, although he was like super mean to her overall. Um, his quote is Mother Teresa was not a friend of the poor, she was a friend of poverty. She said that suffering was a gift from God. She spent her life opposing the only known cure for poverty, which is the empowerment of women and the emancipation of them from livestock versions of compulsory reproduction.
Yes.
So, um, there's also like
Like,
some stuff going on there around like the missionary aspect of going into another country and then just like trying to baptize people and send them to
Yeah,
heaven.
like if you want to go into other countries and like help them and they need help, then I feel like okay, but like I don't know. Just don't I don't I don't understand.
So ultimately she was canonized and she became a saint in 2016.
Hmm.
It's interesting because apparently there's two miracles that have to occur that are
Hmm.
directly correlated to you. And so one of them occurred, I think it was like in 2008 or something. And it was this woman who had some sort of cancer, but she kept the picture of Mother Teresa right next to where the cancer growth was, and the cancer growth went away. And then like I read this interview where the husband was interviewed later. I was like, was it Mother Teresa? She was undergoing 9 years worth of chemotherapy and it finally went away.
That's what I was gonna say. Was it like at her hospital next to the chemo room? Because that seems like
and and then another one happened in 2015 which nobody contested, and so that's when she ended up getting canonized. But it's interesting, one thing I also learned in this process, do you know where the term the devil's advocate comes from?
no.
Okay, so the first time that they were thinking about canonizing her as a saint, they brought in Christopher Hitchens, who was acting in the formal sense as the devil's advocate within the Catholic Church, which was arguing against someone becoming a saint. So they have like a panel, and you come in, and the panel is like, "We think you should be we think this person should be a saint," and then you, as a devil's advocate, come in and say, "Here's why they shouldn't be a saint." Is that also kind of fun?
That part's fun.
Can you imagine Keanu Reeves up there?
Yeah, that's really fun. There was a I'm Googling him and he is an anti-theist, which I think I've heard this before and I agree with. It's like if you're an atheist, you can like kind of wish that God was real. Like, oh, it'd be easier if I believed in God, you know? But as an anti-theist, you're just like, no,
Yeah, I would, I
I don't
would,
think
I would,
I'd be better if I was ignorant to stuff, you know?
I would say that the vast majority of my belief system today was formed by watching Christopher Hitchen videos on YouTube.
Yeah, I want to watch something.
Because I've yet to see one where his logic has been flawed.
Yeah.
So it's definitely fun watching. Again, he's one of those guys who's like right, but also kind of a dick. Like I think of
Yeah, I like
like
Joseph Campbell. I feel like when you see him talking to, it kind of feels that way as well.
I was thinking about like Bill Maher, where like I'm like
Hmm.
I agree with you, and I also hate. I get why people hate progressives when I hear you talk.
That's fair.
Like
I feel like he made that one movie about God, and I was like, God, this is mean. And I'm
it
mean
was
to people who are
really mean.
religious. And I'm like,
Yeah,
this was mean. Like, it was a little too mean even for me. So
yeah,
yeah, no, I
yeah.
agree.
Um, so yeah, that's it. As of 2016, she's been canonized. She was actually interred in a tomb at the original home for the dying destitute. And you can go visit it. It's obviously free. You can go in, you can see her tomb, and there's a statue of her. She was a tiny woman.
Very
She was
small. Yeah.
so small. I saw a picture of her with Hillary Clinton. She like came up to Hillary's like hip. Like she
Yeah,
was a
she's very
tiny,
little.
tiny little thing. And they also there have what's called Mother's Room, which is how she lived. And there is a part of me that's like, there's something in life that I'm missing, because there's got to be some joy in living like that. Otherwise, why would you? Well, I guess you have to suffer. I guess you think that's going to get you to heaven,
Yeah, and I guess that's the goal
to suffer.
to get to heaven so vi passionately. That's all that it matters. And it doesn't matter if I guess if it doesn't matter if you hurt people because when you see people hurting people, you're like, good.
Well, okay, so that's the other part of it that was like I was dwelling on this as well. I was like, these people, what are they called? Dilettes or whatever, the untouchables. Like these were like they were treated like garbage, right? Like they weren't even
Hmm.
treated as humans. And so like maybe this was great for them. Like maybe dying in like a room on a cot, even when you're in pain, is better than being outside in the rain and being pissed on by dogs. I don't know.
Or
Maybe,
maybe she picked them because it was the lowest, like the easiest thing to get into.
yeah, of
Because they
course.
wouldn't know any better, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, because the lowest of the low, it can't afford anything better. One thing Christopher Hitchens said was really interesting. So she had a lot of health problems the older she got. She had like a heart attack or heart failure. She broke her collarbone. One thing that he said was like you'll notice that like she never subjects herself to the treatment within her own facility. She goes to like the best
Oh,
hospitals.
of course. Of course. And of course, like if she had cancer, she would get fucking chemo and like do all of those things. There's no way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
like prayer, I think is fine. I think there's evidence that like magical thinking is good for you. No big deal. Who cares? Like no one's getting
Yeah.
hurt. But like you have to do that in addition to the chemo, in addition to the pain meds, in addition to the actual help.
Yep. Yep.
You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Man, yeah, it boils my blood. It makes me mad. It's just like, why would you do that?
Where's the money? Dude, how much money has accrued in those accounts? Because again, these facilities are run like flop houses.
You just want to hoard money? Like, I feel like I don't know. It's
you look
not,
at their website right now, the Missionary of Charities or Missionaries of Charity, it looks like it was like a 1990s website. Like they don't invest money in anything. They don't put money into anything. It's just like, what's happening to those? It's got to be in the billions by now. Like,
yeah, I've just like been sitting there. I don't know. I'm like Googling around. One of the things says, I don't know if she said this, but like one of the biggest diseases is not leprosy or tuberculosis, but feeling of being unwanted and uncared for and deserted. Like, yeah, but you can also fix the tuberculosis while you're doing that.
yeah. Well, I think someone like that is like so heady about it. That's like
Yeah.
we're gonna level up from this worldly plane. I mean, yeah.
Gross.
It's definitely interesting. And man, every time I get into Catholic Church stuff, I just go so deep. I end up having like 500 tabs open because like one thing goes to the next thing, goes to the next thing, goes to the next thing. It's so fun.
Yeah. No, totally. I actually was researching how you become a saint because I'm going to talk about a saint next week
Fun.
as well.
Are we turning into a religious podcast?
No. Ew, no.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you
Um,
want us to start reading the Bible, I no,
I'm
I'm
not
not gonna
reading the
go into
Bible.
it. Actually, I will go into it because it's gonna be too ambiguous. I know somebody who I grew up with who um I found out that they were being interviewed on like news programs and stuff, and then later I found it was like Fox News and like OAN or whatever,
Hmm.
and they're being touted as like a CEO, tech founder, or whatever. And I
Hmm.
looked up what it was. It's like an app that if you download it every day, it just like takes part of like the Bible and just like sends a push notification so you can read it in your notification. It was like, how is this an invention? Like,
Yeah,
how
no.
is
What?
this like even a thing?
It's so weird when people like have it and like read it all the time. I'm like, what are you getting from that? I don't know.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know? Like I've read Dan Carlin's book a couple times. I think I read all the Harry Potters twice, but I guess I don't know. I just don't feel I don't know what you're getting from that. And if it's again, and if it helps you and you feel good, then great. But please don't hurt people. That's the problem.
Yeah, read all the books you want, do whatever you want. Like we're definitely not about censorship. Read whatever you
Yes,
want, but
of
like also
course.
don't
And believe
use that
whatever you
as
want. Just don't
yeah,
hurt people.
don't use that as justification to hurt people.
Well, thank you, Farz. That was really fun. I feel very riled up. I'm gonna go stand in front of a fan. Also because it's 130 outside, but also it's that. I also meant the thing I forgot to mention in our last episode is I have new stickers, and if you leave us a review in Apple Podcasts or post about us on social, I'll send you one. So if you do those things, please send me an email, doomedtofailpod@gmail.com, and I'll send you a sticker.
And this is
One
our
person's done it so far.
really? That's so
Yeah.
fun.
Hmm.
All right, keep
Um,
doing it, people.
yeah. So thank you. We're at doomedtofailpod at all social media, doomedtofailpod@gmail.com.
And that voice you're hearing is Miles, our guest host for this episode only.
Hmm.
So yeah, I'll go ahead and cut it off and